You did a great job too.
How are you? Good. How you doing?
Good to see you.
We're now ready to get started. I know people are quite fascinated by the model, and we appreciate that, but there are more opportunities to take a gander at it, hear at it a little later. After we finish this meeting tonight. You can't hear us? You know we're right?
Silence, please!
Is that better? All right, is this better? Can you hear me now? Excellent. My name is Eric Wood. I'm with HKS, and I wanted to welcome you to this meeting of the local planning committee for the DIR Hicksville. We have been retained by the town to help figure out how to revitalize downtown Hicksville. So we've been at this for now a couple months, and in previous meetings we had talked through some ideas. So many of the people that I see in the audience as observers are perhaps new to this particular meeting. This is a meeting for the local planning committee specifically. So we welcome you to observe here, and we will reserve a time at the end of this session to entertain comments from you. But for the most part, this is a working committee meeting of the LPC. So I'll get started. What we're going to talk about today are some of the efforts that have been undertaken to date to engage a conversation with many different community members. So we'll have Jim McCaffrey as well as from the town of Oyster Bay, as well as Patrick Jordan from our team to talk about those efforts. We'll also go through and talk about the development framework that we have come forward and have had discussions with many people about, and seem to really coalesce some ideas for where we think Hicksville can grow into the future. And then there's a list of projects that we have identified that would be potentially funded through the DRI program. And there are a lot of different parameters about what the DRI program, the state-run program, will be able to fund. We've gotten a set of preliminary cost measures that allow us to at least help weight what we think this effort might take to actually bring the development framework into fruition. So we'll hear more about some of those ideas and where the LPC members might be interested in advancing one or two or several of these ideas. And then we'll have a generalized discussion. So with that, I'd like to invite Jim McCaffrey to come up and talk about what the town has been doing in the public engagement efforts.
Thank you, Eric. Turn this way so I can go through the PowerPoint. It's great to see everybody here tonight and to see such a large crowd. So I guess apparently some of our public engagement is obviously working. We have a nice crowd here this evening. Some of the steps we've been taking is we posted all of the meeting notices on the town website. We email notices to residents who requested. That means anyone who's on the town's email notification system, the e-news, we send out as soon as we pick the meeting dates, and then we send it out a week before the meeting as a reminder. So we notify as early as we can, and then a week right before the meetings we send it back out again. We post notices on Facebook, on Supervisor Saladino's Facebook page, as well as Town of Oyster Bay Economic Development Facebook page. We live stream the LPC meetings and the workshops. That's a step that many others have not taken, but we felt that for the people that can't attend, we wanted them an opportunity to see it. So all of the meetings are live streamed, and if you can't watch it the night it's actually happening, they are archived, and they'll be on Supervisor Saladino's Facebook page, as well as the Economic Development Facebook page. We do send out emails to local civic groups. We try to keep them informed, and they in turn have been posting it on their Facebook pages and notifying their members. We also send out press releases to all the local media. Whenever we set a date, our public information office sends out press releases, and the local media then has the opportunity to publish it and invite whoever they choose. Now I'll turn it over to Patrick.
Okay. I'm not as tall as Jim. So for public workshops 1 and 2, we did extensive flyering throughout the study area. Workshop 2, we offered 3 different versions. The in-person, which was the evening of December 14th, which I see some familiar faces in the crowd, so they're attended. We did a pop-up session in the mall the following Wednesday, the 21st, I believe, or the 20th. I'm drawing a little blank on the date. And we also offered an online option that nobody signed up for workshop 2. We have an email database gathered from the emails from our first 2 workshops that received the notices for the future workshops. And we'll be receiving notice of workshop 3 on Monday morning. That is 125 email addresses between all the meetings. And we've made some additional outreach to some of the minority communities. Still trying to work out doing some of workshop 2 as a pop-up with the Afghan church. And so we have all that working. One thing we have noticed and we have heard through the process, that works against us for attendance purposes is there are a lot of people who mention study fatigue. I heard a lot about it at the pop-up at the mall. A lot of, oh my God, are we still doing this? How long has this been going on? So I think as we get closer to a finale, hopefully that'll help juice our attendance. So enough about how we talk to people. Let's move on to workshop 2 and see what we heard. For those of you who weren't in attendance at public workshop 2, we presented 5 development scenarios, conceptual elements. Barclay Street West, Nelson Avenue, Broadway, High Line, and Barclay Street East. And participants had the opportunity to spend $10 million of their own DRI dollars on the pieces of these improvements that they liked the best. People were investing in individual pieces within the development, such as new traffic signals, distinctive paving, and street trees, development with retail development with residential on top. So, in people voting with their dollars, Barclay Street West got a majority, clearly got more investment than anywhere else, garnering a third of the dollars spent at between the 2 workshops. The one thing we did see, in addition to how well Barclay Street did, is in the first workshop, one of the things we heard a lot about was pedestrian safety and pedestrian mobility through the downtown areas, one of the hindrances to development. No matter which of the options, with the exception of the High Line, because it didn't have this option, every other option where people spent their money a lot was on traffic signals, on things that improve the pedestrian experience. So that's something we definitely saw as important moving forward as we develop these potential projects, which I will let HKS explain.
Good evening, everybody. Great to be back here. So hope we're going to show you stuff that advances some of the ideas. Some of this, for those of you who attended last time, you will see again developed in more detail. So, in all sort of urban plans we do, there are sort of 3 basic components that are always present. Those can be divided into public and private, but generally for us, it's the open space, public realm, plazas. Second category is circulation, and third category is private development. Private development happens all the time, and so it's the intention to try and get value out of the moves we make, that you support, that produces a public infrastructure, a sense of place that makes the private development special. From the last presentation, this is one of the slides that seemed to get a lot of response. Based on what people had commented on and the kinds of things that people felt were important to really give downtown Hicksville a sense of place, make it an attraction, make it somewhere where both people and developers are interested, is to get some of the congestion of cars, of creating places for people. This should be sort of the number one goal. This is the model that a lot of you have come to look at, and through the sort of magic of PowerPoint, we can show you the existing conditions here and what we're proposing and hoping the result of this is going to be. What to say about this? I think the co-chair, Dave Capel, said something the other week that stuck with me. He said, the basis for our judging any project that we do should be that how we spend the money should be connected, should be interconnected to other projects, and should have an impact. And that's sort of, I think, a good way to sort of settle on this. So to go to these three elements that I talked about, the open space, the circulation, and the development. What you see here is the plan that we're proposing, and what's highlighted here are a sequence of parks. What you see here is the Station Plaza, an enhanced crossing of 106 of Newbridge, what we're calling a Festival Plaza, an improved, enhanced JFK, and then a crossing of Broadway. And then later on, the development of Berkeley East. What you see here are the streets. These are the streets that we're sort of referring as character streets. These are the streets that will be focused on to create new addresses, have a new sense of place in downtown Hicksville. So importantly for us, it's a focus on Berkeley Street, it's a focus on reviving Broadway, and it's a focus on Nelson. And if you looked at the model, you see how those things are emphasized. This is the same plan, and what's highlighted here is all the potential development. So all the new development that would work with those parks and those streets together to make a new sense of what Hicksville as a place could be. The way we've divided it up in terms of focusing the money, focusing the effort, is the whole notion of districts. And what they fall in very neatly to is the area just north of the station, centered around Berkeley Street, the redoing of Broadway in terms of pedestrian amenities, in terms of landscaping, in terms of pedestrian crossings, as well as new development. And then last but not least, Nelson District. The reason we've given these the labels we've given them is because a lot of this depends on cooperation with the MTA. The MTA, because of the expansion of the train facilities, has a certain amount budgeted to improve the parking situation adjacent to the station. So how the Berkeley Street district evolves will depend a lot on working with the MTA. We just recently had a call with them as a group, and we feel it was very positive. They're very receptive to the idea of mixed-use development and see that development near to a station can be so much more than just parking garages. In terms of Broadway, the reason we've dubbed the Broadway District DOT is because to do the kinds of improvements that we've heard from many people that they want done, in terms of feeling that Broadway is not just a traffic artery, but it's something that people can feel comfortable crossing. We've heard from a lot of people that the sense of Broadway, a lot of people who've lived here for most of their lives have a sense that in the 1960s, the shops along Broadway used to be special. And so being able to get to those shops and improve for pedestrians as place, these two blocks in particular, will need working with DOT to make the street improvements that we're proposing. And then Nelson District, we've dubbed this private development district because this is mostly dependent on the owners in these blocks coming together and realizing the vision and sort of getting the benefit out of the infrastructure that the investment will create. So more of that detail in a second. So firstly, we're going to focus on each one of them. We're going to go through this quite quickly just to show some of the elements that we're looking at. So this would be the Berkeley idea, reconstituting Berkeley as a street, and then taking this potential development land and treating it in three highlighted districts here. Here you see Berkeley Street. I'll show you in a second. We're proposing a new station plaza. And then lastly, we're proposing this area here, linking the station plaza. You don't see it in this district, but this eventually will link to a renovated JFK Memorial Park. This, I don't need to tell you, is the current condition today. We've heard all sorts of words describing this, but there are many ways in which the traffic around here, congestion is the politest way to say it. A lot of improvement could be done here, and you're all very familiar with the kinds of situations. I mean, this, we've sort of labeled this slide conflict. I mean, I think that understates it, because you have parking, you have people dropping off, you have people making their way from their train to their cars, you have people waiting for people coming off the train. We feel like this could be improved tremendously. We're going to show you. So one of the things that we feel is very important is to rationalize the access to the station. And so what we're proposing here is to put most of the traffic accessing the station on 106 and 107. Getting to the station by proposing this focus, this station plaza here. John Street would become very important, Berkeley Street would become very important, and the traffic approaching the station here, which we'll understand in a second, is being encouraged to circulate around these blocks and get access to parking. So people will be able to drop off at the station, get access around the parking. The other way, coming from the south, you'd come up 106, there'd be one turn on Berkeley, an additional turn on St. John's. Yes. 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 And then only one, not several as there are today. And then what you see added in this drawing is the access to the parking. So these would be parking structures that at the moment we're at grade. You have about 880 spaces. This would add 500-600 spaces, additional spaces to that area. This is the same idea, just 3 dimensions to make it a bit clearer. So Berkeley Street would become your special mixed-use street. The structures that you see over here are housing above retail. So what we're proposing is new parking structures that get lined with retail, and then above them is housing. And the retail and the housing will all be accessed off Berkeley. One of the things that's important here is to try and capture the 1 million plus people annually that come off the train station get in their cars and leave Hicksville. And what we like about the Berkeley proposal is that people coming off the train will have a few hundred feet further to walk after getting off the train, where the idea is that here they will have choices of restaurants, of bars, of meeting people after work, and then it becomes a different place on weekends. So that's the idea here, and we'll look at the station plaza in more detail. This is a section showing you the idea. So what we're proposing is the parking structures here, lined by retail at the ground floor and then floors of residential above. And what you see here is the shape of what Berkeley would look like. So a lot of activity, active sidewalks, cars, pedestrians. This would become a special place. Just wanted to show you what it would look like. There's an issue of timing, when the MTA will actually build their structures, that this could start immediately. That you would lose a couple of hundred spaces, but you could already have the beginning of a special place, keeping the parking in place that's already there. In each one of the districts, we've done this diagram. I don't want to spend time on this, but you can see that what we've started to think about are all the pieces that go together. So what you see on this drawing is what's in this pinkish, purplish color are all the potential development sites. What you see in the brown are public infrastructure projects. So you would improve Berkeley by putting trees, by putting landscape, by putting lighting. You would improve the area around the station plaza, which I'm going to come to in a second, a crossing of 106, and then the potential paving and landscaping of this, what we're calling the Festival Plaza. What's interesting about these numbers is that we've looked at all the development that all the projects in the model that you looked at would be, and that's plus minus 1 million square feet of new development. I mean, we always felt, what we've said in day one is that the 4-story limit that the residents of Hicksville are most happy with is not the issue. We think to revive downtown Hicksville, what you need is coverage. You need a lot of projects. If all these projects were just 1 story, you would still see dramatic change. So for us, that's the issue. So out of all those, yes, the 4-story limit, I'm saying to you about 1 million square feet is in that model. Half of it would come out of the improvement of Berkeley. So this is just, I'm not going to go through this now, but what we started to do is look at each one of the sites and see how much residential space, how much commercial space each one of those sites would yield. So we can sort of look at that further. So now the idea of the station plaza. The idea of the station plaza is you take Wyckoff, which exists today, and you make a special address in front of the station. This is landscaped, this has trees on it, it's covered for inclement weather, it has a very nice plaza that can be used for events, could be sort of lined with food trucks or have pop-up things on it, so very sort of active place. And here you see how the circulation would work. So as I said, John Street would be an approach, Berkeley too. You could come in, stop, drop off here as well, and then easily get to the parking around the edge. Just wanted to show some examples of what this could be. So this is Penn Station in Baltimore. Interestingly, you think of it as the main station at a fairly large city. Hicksville has more passengers than Baltimore does. Of course, Baltimore has a city around it, but Hicksville is going to have that activity around it. The interesting thing when you look at this is, here are your drop-offs, here is a plaza, here is a park, here are food trucks, so very active place. Just to give you a sense, from there to there is 200 feet. We have from here to here is 250 feet. So it gives you a sense that fairly similar, you could have something along these lines in terms of the activity, in terms of the diversity, in terms of place in the city. Okay. Wanted to show you here, this is the bus train station in Los Angeles. Just the value of having an address in the front, separating pedestrians from traffic movements, having a front door, allowing people to drop off and then circulate in the surrounding roads. So this is basis of the idea that we're trying to show you, and this is the same bus station showing you what doing something special in front of the station allows you to do. Okay, and this is the same exercise that we did. So here is, in the brown, is all the infrastructure that would need to get done. Here is the Station Plaza Park that we need to get done. And these are three, the way that I've done this, if you look at these drawings, there's a bit of double dipping. So you'll see some of these sites repeat themselves. But the idea here is that if the committee and if the public chooses that this is the project that you want to do, these are the immediate projects that come into play as a result of that. That's what these drawings are trying to show. And there you see the 300,000. Okay, there you see in detail what each one of those, which Eric is going to talk about in a little while. So one of the other projects we talked about is Broadway. So big issue for Broadway is make it pedestrian friendly. Number one, we've heard this over and over again. People have to feel comfortable crossing the street. This means crosswalks, it means pedestrian lights, it means seating, it means signage, all the kinds of things that make a street feel more like a place rather than a truck route through the center of the city. And that's sort of what those things are pointing out. The other thing in addition to that is to make it feel like a space in terms of the buildings that define the street. So what you see is here are the existing stores. These are the old historic stores of Hicksville on Broadway, that you would match these over time with buildings on the other side. And what that would do is, there is the top section is what Broadway looks like today. And by doing this 4-story structure with retail, potentially commercial for your startups, etc., small to small scale, and then residential on top, set back, you now get a street that starts to have a scale to it. It starts to feel more like the old Broadway. You're never going to get the old Broadway, but by defining both sides of the streets, you get closer to that. And this is the kind of thing that we heard right when we started the project, that there were certain streets that people preferred, that they liked the character of. Main Street in Huntington was one of those streets. So here you see the diversity of buildings, the landscaping, potentially parking along the street. So it feels like an active sort of neighborhood street rather than just traffic. We looked for examples sort of closer that people could relate to. So this is State Street in Schenectady. And you see that the street is fairly wide. This is one of the state routes, so it does carry heavy traffic. But what you see is, here's the station, the bus station and the station. But you see the dramatic effect of having both sides of the street. Also, want to point out the diversity of activities on the sidewalk that start to make special character places along the street. And the last thing is, just coincidentally, it happens to have a park, also in a similar shape to JFK Memorial Park, that sort of defines the end of the street. So this needn't just be a traffic island. It could be something that adds significantly to the street, and we'll sort of show you that in a second. So again, the sidewalk experience, more diversity, paving, planting, scale. The other thing that's important is treating the street surface. So we look for some examples that we sort of hope people, the kinds of things that people may be familiar in this region. So one of them is Jersey City. So Jersey City has the light rail, the Hudson Bergen light rail, but they take pedestrians across it, and you can see how by changing the paving, having something important on the other side, using color, how this kind of thing can change dramatically a street that's given over just to traffic. This slide to show you the potential of street furniture, show you the potential again of materials on the ground, can change the character of the place dramatically. And then coordinating the street furniture. We think this is very important. These are actually images from a project Eric and I worked on in Lower Manhattan. And so the idea that you take everything from the seating to the trash receptacles, to the bicycle lockups, to the lighting, and it starts to feel more like a place, adds significantly to transforming what Broadway feels like today. And again, same exercise. If you do this as your public infrastructure improvement, showing treatment at the intersections, and Broadway itself being improved in the ways I've talked about, here is the sort of square foot of development that would relate to that. And detail, as I said. Okay, JFK Park. We believe this could have a dramatic effect. The size of JFK Park today is about 0.7 acres. And we heard in the public meetings that people feel it's not really a park, you can't get to it, look at all the traffic you have to cross, and so on. And we feel that by making some moves, which we're proposing, maybe not all of them together, but acquiring the MTA parking lot, getting rid of the roads, Jerusalem, just from there to there. So you'd have to bypass Jerusalem over there to get to Plainview. Instead of turning there, you just turn earlier and you get onto Berkeley, take you out to Plainview. The other thing is taking this plaza, which is today the taxi plaza and drop-off plaza, and if you do the station plaza, you've taken the traffic off that. And this becomes a key element to link the station plaza with the park. So if I just measure the size of this park today, as it's outlined by these dark lines, we've increased it by 3 acres. So it's gone from being just a sort of leftover traffic island to a really usable park. And so we think that's very important in terms of my appeal to the committee of how you spend, where you make the first moves, how you spend the money. I think getting a park of this size, which you can do a lot of things with, it's a place, but it's also a place where you can do events, you can do your farmers markets. It becomes a place for, as housing starts to begin to be built, it's a place for people to use as an amenity. Okay, so here again, you see the idea of the park, the idea of the connection, and then further, at some further stage when East Berkeley gets developed. Here are just a few examples of what this could look like. Again, a project that Eric and I have worked on in our past history, which is Zuccotti Park in downtown. And yes, this was expensive, but look at the trees, the sort of spaces, the idea that it's a connecting route through, that the sort of space inside is a real relief from the hard surfaces of the city. Another example of the same kind of thing is Pioneer Square in Seattle. Special place, but also enough hard surface where you can program the park. You can do several things on weekends, during the summer. This kind of thing can be used in those ways. And then farmers market and event markets. I mean, these lend themselves to linear spaces, which, remember, we have these parks which are connected east-west along the railway line. These things lend themselves to being used in that way. And of course, at other times, they can, this can be a fire lane, so you get, and this can be sort of used, the canopies of the market get taken down, you have a beautiful aloe of trees that becomes your park. Okay. Wanted to show you this one. This is the park as part of the Embarcadero in San Francisco. But just to imagine that this pier building, this terminal building, was your elevated railway line. So forms a great backdrop to a farmer's market, sort of creates the space in which that exists. The other thing is the notion of an underline. So you take the railway structure, instead of it being an eyesore, you do various things with it. So one of the things to do that doesn't cost a lot of money, art installations. You light the space so it becomes a space that's attractive. And you can do various things with the space. I mean, this is, we're sort of reaching high here, but this is San Antonio, Texas, where they've reestablished their river. But the idea of just using lighting and using the columns as the setting for doing something special that people see and see through, it has a potential that could apply here. And then the last thing is artworks on the columns. There are places in America where communities have sort of used these columns to do work on, so could become very special. And then, of course, the High Line. What we feel about the High Line, and we sort of, when we had our last session with you, there are some people that feel very strongly about it. We feel that this is the kind of thing that would come later. You first have to solve the problems at street level. And once you get an attractive street environment, then later on, the High Line can become an addition, some additional value to what that is. So you can connect Station Plaza to, to an eventual development in Berkeley East. But we feel that Berkeley East and the High Line are two things that will come online later on in the process. And you saw this image last time. And to steal from the High Line, which has been such a great success, but what I want to point out is they've been very ingenious in terms of creating special places. So when you think of what the High Line can become, this kind of thing where sort of just a theatre park element has been done and feels in this kind of unusual but special relationship with the street, some of these possibilities will become possible. And so I think that this is the kind of thing not to throw out, but it's not for the near term. And then the idea of the High Line becoming a park up above. But I think, firstly, the park at street level. Again, same exercise where you take JFK Park and you look at the development sites around. If it's possible to extend JFK Park, vacate the piece that's getting you onto Berkeley, vacate this piece here that's coming in from Broadway, from Route 107, and extend Berkeley all the way up to Nelson, then you bring into play all these properties, and in the end, you actually get potentially more development. Remember I said in the beginning, 1 million square feet on that model? Half of that would result from the renovation of JFK Park. So something to really think about. Okay, the detail. And then last but not least, of course, Nelson Avenue. And Nelson Avenue has this, I think one of my partners remarked the first day we were on the project that, yes, downtown has problems. There are a lot of empty sites, a lot of downtown sort of property is at the moment just at grade parking. But one thing that Hicksville has is great street and blocks. The old sort of plain view that comes in and forms this incredible bend. And creates these odd-shaped blocks. For us, this is an opportunity to do something really special. I mean, we from scratch are so often in these open design projects, you're faced with an orthogonal grid you can't do very much with. This is a waiting opportunity for something special to happen. This is what this could look like. So here's your at-grade parking. Here's development on 106. Here's what Nelson Avenue could look like. So possibly a two-level restaurant, maybe sports bar, maybe something like that, that sort of, has balconies that overlook the street, and then residential tucked in on top. And what that could potentially look like, and the kinds of things that it could produce. I mean, this is East 4th Street in Cleveland, but what you should see here is the narrow dimension of the street, restaurant life. It's in a very concentrated area, special paving, space given over to the pedestrian. Couldn't resist this. A lot of you are familiar with this, Stone Street in Lower Manhattan, but what I love about this image, yes, this is surrounded by Lower Manhattan, we're not Lower Manhattan, but I love the bend in the street. You see how special the bend in the street sort of defines the space, that you're not just in a block looking down sort of into an opening. This feels like a place, and it's made by that bend in the street. You have that in Nelson Avenue. So I think that's clearly a real opportunity. And this is just photographing the model, sort of showing that, you have this bend in the street and the sort of triangular shaped site at the end here on 106 could be a very special building. We'd sort of heard that there was some interest in possibly a small hotel. Ideal site for that. And here's from there looking back. So here you would look back along, here's Duffy, Nelson, and here you would end in the park over there. Okay, and here's the same exercise. So what we've done here is, again, here are private projects. Here's what we would use monies to do, is to reconfigure, transform Nelson, make the crossings of Broadway and 106 very prominent. And so this is an opportunity to really become the place, the destination in the city. And again, doing that in more detail. So I'm going to hand over to Eric, and he's going to start talking about these projects in more detail. Thanks.
Thank you, Cecil. So one of the things that we have been describing here is the general development framework for how we envision growth and development occurring in the downtown, and ways in which we can actually redefine and strengthen the character here. So this particular diagram starts to look more carefully within those frameworks what kinds of specific actions can be taken to implement this thing. So we've basically described a set of about 6 or 8 here. So all of the LPC members, you have a chart in front of you, which describes what those things are. And I'm going to walk through how we envision. We believe that the first move, actually I'm going to switch over so that the rest of the observers can perhaps see this chart more clearly. Is that a bit more clear?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So, the first move that we think should be made here is Station Plaza and the entry drive to the LIR station. We say that because it is pivotal to decongest the center for all the other things that we're speaking about to take place. So the new LIR station entry drive is what we think right now would be move 1 in tandem with the Station Plaza move 2. Move 3 would be looking at the crosswalk across New Bridge. So you can take them as a group, one might suggest, as the first moves. And one of the things that we've been working on is looking at the cost to create. These are very preliminary numbers that we're looking at right now, just to right at this moment in discussion with the LPC members, to give a little bit more quantification and to help us weight some of these opportunities and see what kind of ranking we may want to give to advance any one of these or several of them. So the other move that I think would happen soon thereafter is what we're dubbing the Festival Plaza. That component that is between New Bridge and Jerusalem Avenue, where currently the drop-off for the taxis are located. We believe that that extension of the public realm from the new Station Plaza eastward towards JFK Park, as it would get expanded, would be the appropriate next step. It may take a little bit of time to actually do the things that we're speaking about for the expansion of JFK Park, but I think these moves that we're describing at this moment are things that can get started in the near term, in the next 12 to 18 months. The other thing that we were discussing in the general framework of things is what to do with the underside of the track so that that experience is enhanced and made better for commuters. So partly having an idea of using a colorful or artful lighting program to make it a little bit more diverting, amusing for not only the commuters but for residents. We're also hopeful that the MTA would apply its art program here so that that space continues to have installations, some of which may be permanent, some of which may be, we'll say, rotating, existing for 18 to 24 months and then changing out, because I believe that that kind of turnover would interest residents as well as the commuters. If there's something that is different in that particular space this year versus 2 years from now, would you not want to come down and see it? We also believe that doing a color scheme in the daytime as well as something at night is also going to be able to create this place as a diversion, or we'll say an amusement, more so than what it is now. Now, one of the bigger investments here would be talking about Barclay Street. Right now, the ownership of the land on the south side of Barclay Street is predominantly the town of Oyster Bay. North of it, you've got, fortunately, large parcels that are owned by just a handful of people, as opposed to, we'll say, Barclay Street East, which have upwards of 30 different owners. So the ability to, I think, bring people to the table to talk about how they collaboratively work towards bringing the character of Barclay into this transformed vision is much more possible on this stretch of Barclay than perhaps any other place that we're speaking about. The actual first investment of just putting the streetscape elements in Barclay isn't such a big deal. What's going to be the bigger deal is lining those streets with the active uses that we're envisioning. That, we believe, is coming from the private sector. So hosting those conversations will take some time. Being able to get agreement on the shape of those things is what the town can do through zoning regulations as well as design controls. And that's something that the town should, and we encourage, to continue to pursue, because I know that it got started and it's been on hiatus pending the outcome of these investigations that we've been doing. But soon thereafter, it should get done and finalized, because that level of predictability of what the shape of those buildings and the character of that street is will only encourage private sector investments. And we think that Barclay Street has the great ability to sort of redefine what this place in downtown Hicksville can be thought about. The parking structures are one of the other elements that work in tandem with the liners, we'll say, of activity here. Because the MTA is interested in increasing the number of parking spots for its commuters, being able to employ a shared parking strategy here is going to be absolutely critical in order for this kind of development to take place. We believe that the MTA, from our conversations, is very willing to take that approach, in part because they see the ability of generating activity in and around their train stations to be of great benefit, not only to their ridership, but for the towns that they're within. We also believe that the kind of garages that would serve the commuter here would also work well for residents, particularly on the weekend when the ridership for the commuters is much less. And if we're generating the right kind of retail activity along this new Barclay Street, there's going to be ample space for residents to park in the parking garages there. So next, let me talk about JFK expansion. Currently, the 0.7 acres of land is controlled by the New York State DOT. As Cecil had mentioned, there are different roadways that go through it. East Barclay Street, which is that loop that connects Jerusalem through to East Barclay Street. There's that segment that sidles it, Jerusalem Avenue. Not a heavily trafficked street. We believe that if those two elements are vacated, it definitely creates the opportunity to expand the park so it's no longer just perceived as a medium, that it can actually be perceived as an occupiable space, and a space that actually will be an effective gathering space for many of the community events that many people have mentioned they would like to see happen here. This is where I would suggest most of the dollars for the creation of a new downtown probably should be spent. Whether or not they're spent out of the DIR bucket of dollars, or whether they're spent out of some other contributing sets of dollars, remains to be discussed. So it's part of what we're going to be exploring with the LPC group right here, right now. As your consultants, we tend to strongly underscore the value of open space when it comes to community development. When you have the right amount and the right quality of open space, it increases the perception of real estate value. And I talk about it as perception because value is just whatever anybody's willing to pay for stuff. And most people who are investing, particularly in retail, they're counting on a volume of people passing through, whether they're passing through by walking, or whether they're passing through on a bicycle, or whether they're passing through in a car. Being able to have those people gather is going to be supported by this open space. And the other piece that I guess we didn't actually point out so dramatically is that because it forks, there's an ability to place something really iconic and important at that fork, which I believe could become, not unlike the Eagle right now, a highly regarded landmark for announcing you've arrived at downtown. You think that's funny, I do too. But downtown does need to have some sort of a marker, and I think this open space helps to do so, and even putting the exclamation point on it works to its benefit. The next one I'll talk to is just the general improvement of Broadway. Broadway in its length has a number of different aspects about it. On the east side that we think are important, that certainly have been discussed as being beloved, that is the two-story structures, the small storefronts, What we'd like to be able to do is replicate that so that the two sides are working in tandem. The west side of Broadway right now is a different character. Many of the buildings are set back. So one of the things that we are proposing occurs is the zoning regulations talk about new buildings that come up be built to the street frontage property line. Reestablishing that street wall that used to be there when Broadway was much narrower in the 40s and 50s will help, I believe, instill in the retailers who are going to be there that there is the kind of cross-street activity that tends to reinforce the volume of revenue that they can potentially gain here. Having people feel safe about crossing the street is the other component here, so that's why we're recommending that the crosswalks be more visible by using what the New York State Department of Transportation has. They call it the Complete Streets Measure Program, which talks about street prints, which effectively visually differentiates the street from the crosswalk from the street. We're also talking about bump outs that using the side lanes would effectively bring the pedestrian a bit further out towards the crossing, so the actual distance that people cross is a little bit narrower. That also, that the moving traffic will now, I think, see the pedestrians to a much greater degree. That working in conjunction with signalization, synchronization, as well as using traffic signal stanchions that are more at eye level, all of which are part of the DOT program, but we were suggesting that that kind of enhancement would be something we would promote here. The other aspect of the streetscape that we were talking about for Barclay being specialized, or we'll say branded set of streetscape elements would include banners, street paving that is distinctive on the sidewalks, all things that would begin to talk about this stretch of Broadway as being distinctive and different from other parts of Broadway as it moves through Hicksville. That's something that could get started today. It really does sort of get predicated on picking the elements from the streetscape program that you would like to see happen here. Now let's talk about Nelson Avenue. Nelson Avenue is that marvelous infrastructure that you already have in place. I say it's marvelous because, as Cecil mentioned, it inflects. It has that bend. It is of a scale in terms of its street width dimension that already sort of announces itself as a crossable street, as a walkable street. So we definitely believe that this is a place where investment in that streetscape, not unlike what we mentioned before, looking at pavers, looking at bollards, looking at a whole family of things that would denote this as the new downtown, would encourage private sector investment. There's been a call for projects that was issued in this program by the town in December. And we got several different responses. Some of those responses were looking at this particular area in Nelson. So we know that there's interest on the part of private sector investors, as well as right now landowners, to contribute to what this notion of what the future of Nelson Avenue could be. So it would be important for the LPC members to think about where you'd like to concentrate, which steps would be first, second, and third in how you want to move forward with this particular vision. And ultimately, I would say this is a build-out that potentially would happen within the next 3 to 5 years, which is outside the general parameters of what the DRI program is looking to do. The DRI program is very specific that they'd like to have quote-unquote shovel-ready projects to invest in, things that are ready to get started in the next 18 to 24 months. Some of the things that I've mentioned here aren't that. Some of these things that we mentioned here we think are very important to move Hicksville into the place that it wants to be again. So the LPC will need to help instruct us as to how to sort these things and rank these things. Now I'd like to just have Jim McCaffrey come up and talk about some of the other call for projects that we had received and what the nature of those particular projects may be.
As organized, as mentioned, we did send out an RFI, request for information, for property owners or business owners that may be interested in locating in the DRI. And as he had stated, I'm just going to back a step further. I'm talking to all the committee members, I don't want to cut my back to you. There is a limited amount of funding, so as a committee, one of your jobs is to select the best projects that are economically viable and that can happen, like he said, in the next 18 to 24 months. We did receive 8 proposals. You'll have them on your sheets there. But I just wanted to just give you a quick rundown of how we did the process. The Hicksville DRI Local Planning Committee is seeking proposals for private projects to be considered for DRI funding. The DRI plan will likely include a combination of public and private projects to help revitalize the downtown. You've seen some of the public projects already, and these are the private projects that submitted. There were certain criteria that we were looking at to see if we should advance these projects to the full committee. Some of them were the community and economic benefits. Does the project benefit the larger community of Hicksville? We didn't want the private projects and to spend DRI money to benefit just the business owner. It had to affect the whole area as a whole. The potential to transform the downtown. We wanted the DRI projects should have substantial demonstrable benefits beyond their additional site. How will your project spur additional development activity or other improvements in Hicksville? And the project submitted had to support the DRI vision, goals, and strategies that we had set forth. We wanted to see how the projects relate to and strengthen the other elements of the downtown, some of the things that you've seen, the public spaces. How would any of these private investments help that? And we wanted the private investment to leverage additional investment in downtown Hicksville. The LPC wants to see how far we can stretch our $10 million grant. And we wanted to make sure that any grant that we did give out was leveraged by the private investors. We wanted to demonstrate that financing was committed to the project and that the projects were heavily leveraged by private investment. They had to be viable and feasible. How realistic is the project in the near to mid-term? As Eric had stated, within the next 18 to 24 months, can these projects be accomplished? Does the proposer have site control, which is an important element here? Some of the proposals that we received did not have site control, and they couldn't demonstrate to us that they would have the site control within that next time period. Public support. We wanted to see that the public was behind any of the proposals that we did receive. They had to demonstrate public support either through the DRI process or through prior planning and zoning meetings that we've held. If we can go through them quickly now. We had a project for a boutique hotel, a 40-room hotel, which was going to be on West Cherry Street. It actually would have been right next to the community center here. And they put in a proposal, and it was going to be a $12 million project, but we didn't feel that they had full total site control and the financing and leveraging at this point in time.
What does site control mean?
Site, I'll answer this one question, although I am addressing. Site control actually means that you own the property. I could come in with the best proposal or something that I think will work, but if I can't demonstrate that I actually own the property and can do it in the next 18 to 24 months, there's no sense of this committee. We can't commit DRI funds to a project that may never happen. So site control was one of the major components of the proposals that we're considering. There was a proposal from 99 Hicksville Station Plaza, which is 99 Newbridge Road. It's, Cecil, would you be able to pull up the Nelson Avenue? The first slide that we showed? I think the first one where it had abandoned street was the, this was a mixed-use development of, this is a mixed-use development with a projected project cost of about $40 million. They were able to demonstrate that they do have bank financing that they can have in place. They will be they were requesting $1.5 million of the DRI, and the rest they would finance. So the additional $38.5 million would be financed through the developer. It's a mixed-use project. The whole site plan and everything has yet to be determined, but it would be retail with apartments above. And that's the one, yeah?
We'd be talking about this site up here, is where we're looking at.
So it would have frontage on, it could back up to Newbridge and also on Nelson. So this could be one of the corner pieces of the Nelson Avenue development, which we felt is important to get us jump-started. And like I said, one of the main key components is that they have site control. They've owned it since the early 2000s. We had a request from the Oyster Bay Brewery. They're a successful brewery located actually in a hamlet up in Oyster Bay. They've been open for a few years now, and they wanted to also come down and be part of the downtown revitalization. But they did not have site control at this point in time, so they're still very interested in relocating here. Once some of these buildings get placed, they would love to be a part of it. And as you'll see in one of the other proposals, we are looking to create a small business development fund, so they may be able to tap into that.
So typically they'll be a tenant, not an owner.
They're going to be a tenant, so they don't have a building or a location yet at this point in time. I think they're going to choose as they see, where the best location for them to be, whether it be on Nelson Avenue or on West Barclay. So at this point in time, we didn't feel like that deserved to be advanced. We did receive an RFI from Trinity Lutheran Church and School for a daycare facility. Currently, they have a daycare facility now, and they want to expand it more for newborns and infants. So they had requested a grant of $75,000, and they would match, it would be a 50% match. The congregation would match any DRI grant that was given to them. We thought that deserved further consideration. We received one from Nassau BOCES for a mass transit, or a transit actually, training facility, provide a job facility to train people for positions in all transit needs. They were looking to come further into the Hicksville DRI area. They currently have a facility in Hicksville, but they wanted to be a part of this. But right again, they don't have site control, they don't have a building or an actual space that they were willing to lease yet. So at this point in time, we would consider them as maybe as part of the Small Business Development Fund, but at this point in time, we don't want to push that further. There was a proposal for a medical hyperbaric oxygen therapy center to come in here. That would be an $800,000 project. They were looking for $400,000 in grant funding. But once again, right now they don't have any lease or any specific building, so we didn't feel that worthy to advance. There was an additional private development, a mixed use for retail with apartments above in 80 and 82 and 76 North Broadway. They currently have apartments now, and they want to expand that and include part of William Street, which is over, by the Wendy's. But part of that would be requiring additional site acquisition and the town dead-ending one of the streets. So we didn't feel that they're shovel-ready in the 18 to 24 months, and we still had to work out some financing. And the final one was a private development from a group, ListNet. They're like a tech incubator that does shared space, and they were looking to find space in the DRI. But once again, they don't have site control. There's no signed lease, or they don't own any buildings. So they would fall into the category that if the committee so chose, they may be something we could fund with the Small Business Development Fund. And those were the 8 proposals that we received. So
this is the good part. This is where the LPC members get to talk. So at this point, I'd like to invite the co-chairs to weigh in about some of the thoughts that we've seen today and which direction or what instructions you'd like to give your fellow members.
So granted, this is an outsider's view. I'm not nearly as familiar with Hicksville as the rest of you, but this is a grand vision that I think if it were fully implemented would be transformative for the community. And from what I gather responds to the major criteria that the long process that the community's been through to bring us to this point are being met in terms of height and scale, location, and qualities, particularly around pedestrian safety and access. The numbers are daunting and clearly well outside the limits of the DRI grant. $10 million, $10 million is a lot of money, but it doesn't go very far on a project of this scale. But I know from my own experience that an undertaking like this is going to take a significant amount of time. And the challenge here, from my perspective, is to identify those activities that are going to spark everything else to happen. Where can we start that will have the effect of inducing the other things to come along? There are other sources of funding that can be available on the public side. I sit on the Long Island Regional Economic Development Council, and I suspect that there's additional funding that could be available through the REDC, where the DRI falls short, and there are other agencies, state and federal, that can provide additional funding. And there may be mechanisms for the town to use to leverage local resources. But, just looking at this, you've got the 99 Newbridge proposal, which I understand is a $40 million private investment, and the $106 million MTA investment in parking garages, and then the additional retail and housing component there. You're talking about how you can use $10 million to leverage $150 million investment in the short term, and it's really remarkable. So I'd just like to tip my hat to the firm for what you've done here. It's really, not only is it exceptionally presented, but the model and the images, they make it very accessible for a layperson like myself to understand it.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Yeah, so that, the
We
challenge.
do like our models.
Models work. The challenge here is, which of these activities, are most important in terms of making this all happen?
I just want to echo what Dave said here. I mean, he had the benefit of being involved in this before and doing something like this, and I think that what your firm has done has really opened our eyes up. This is my first opportunity to be involved in something like this. We've had the benefit of having our town personnel, Colin Bell and Jim McCaffrey over here, really working closely with you. But again, compliments are well deserved for your firm and what you've been able to actually open our eyes up to. This is really just a phenomenal presentation to see this whole project evolve in educating us as to what the different opportunities are. So again, thank you.
Well, thank you.
And one more thing I'd like to add. Just out of my own experience, in terms of the emphasis that you placed on the importance of public space and how that can induce private investment. In Greenport, where I was mayor, my major initiative was to build a public park in the middle of the village on the water, which was a pipe dream, frankly, when we started. We had no idea how we were going to pay for it. We didn't own the land. We didn't have a clue. But it was something that we decided we wanted to do. So we approached that incrementally, the way we're talking about approaching this process. It took us 13 years to build it. I think we had to file 28 different funding applications for various state and federal agencies to get it done. But it has totally transformed the village. And before we even put a shovel in the ground, just the talk about it and the planning on it induced private investment. We had a hotel built alongside it, restaurants started opening up. The whole process of private investment started as soon as people began to feel that this was something that was really going to happen. And I think you'll see the same thing happen around these public realm amenities that we're talking about here.
Thank you.
Thank you, right now.
Phil, would you like to make a comment?
To change the whole, this will do the same thing.
Yes, thank you. I guess my comment is informed quite a bit by the involvement I had for 7 years with the Revitalization Committee. Many of the people who are in the audience today. Just to briefly state some of our goals that were developed there, which I think the plan that you presented helps address a lot of those. I think one of the first things we always talked about was recovering some of the land that was now parking, street level parking all over the town that's destroys the appearance, the aesthetics of the downtown, and undermines the tax base. Second thing, to reclaim that land, we always thought we needed some mixed use development with up to 500 units of co-ops and apartments and such. And third area was to relieve congestion. The fourth was JFK as a focal point. And it was always a concern of 106 and 107 being difficult because of the amount of traffic. So that being said, I think the areas that you presented match those goals, particularly I forget exactly how you call this, but the A, B, and C, which is the new Station Plaza, the east, I guess that's West Barclay, and Nelson Avenue, I think particularly quickly help address all of those concerns. So I appreciate the models also and the effort that went into this. Thank you.
Rose?
I agree with everything that's been said, and I think what amazes me too, and it makes me feel very hopeful, or aside from all the things we've talked about here and has been addressed, but the potential projects, those that are interested in coming are a vast variety and would bring so much potential to our community and to the residents of our community, certainly in the workforce, being hopefully adding more jobs and opportunities for young people right here in Hicksville. And they're so varied, aside from, for example, Trinity Lutheran, that would like to expand the program they already have, and that is a very vital part of our community that many, many people are very active in already, and to see something like that be able to grow, and that they are interested in making sure that it grows. So everything that you've done and presented is, I think we've come a long way from where we were for many, many, many years, and struggling and getting no place. And I think tonight we really see things start to be almost ready to see something real happening here in Hicksville. So thank you.
Well, I know. This may not reach entirely.
I'll just yank on it.
Yes.
That's fine. That's fine, thank you. Again, kudos to your organization. I mean, we couldn't have envisioned anything close to that, and it's absolutely great. My biggest concern is, Stella mentioned, being the chair of that committee and also being heavily involved with the chamber, and knowing that a lot of property owners are still out there that might be willing to do stuff. But I know there was a specific time frame that you guys have to abide by. Are there any other opportunities where somebody might be able to submit or to reframe some of the things that were already submitted?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right. Everything on the first page, most of it I absolutely love, but again, my concern is getting those property owners to understand that things are possible and that things are going to move forward. If anybody hasn't looked, the prices of property are going through the roof right now because we're working that out. Oh, yes, they are.
That's a good thing.
That's a crazy thing. But again,
like I said, value is all about perception.
yeah, but the challenge is going to be for somebody who wants to come in and do the development and try to piece those different properties together. I know there's a lot of talk going on, but again, this looks fantastic so far. Thank you.
Ryan, I know that you have opinions. Would you like to share what you are thinking about currently?
You know, I'm on the board of a nonprofit that actually is based out of Launchpad in Westbury. And what I've seen and experienced there over the last year and a half of my involvement is what an amazing thing for a community, a digital development and a technological development epicenter can have as a ripple effect on the surrounding community. The private development of that digital ballpark, that last item there, combined with, you know, better walkability, combined with more housing opportunity, I've seen personally in many different forms, both locally and, you know, across the country and other things that I follow, what a tremendous impact that can have on the community from the ground up. You know, Long Island's in strong danger of losing a lot of its young people. You know, the stats are coming out more and more that people are fleeing because of the rising cost of housing and different opportunities that are harder and harder to get. So I think that, you know, not only is everything amazing and totally blow away, and I've given you every compliment I possibly can come up with, I think that that has tremendous value to have the community be strong for decades to come, not just immediate, but to plant the seeds and lay the groundwork for a successful and prosperous Hicksville for the next 40 years. I'm really excited about that.
Thank you. Well, as Dave Capella had mentioned, that this is a large vision which takes a significant investment over a longer period of time than what the DRI parameters have described. So one of the things I'm interested in hearing from the LPC members are, what do you think are the kinds of projects that we've described you think should be supported by the DRR program, or things that we haven't described that you think should be included? So Rizwan.
Well, I'm not going to answer you this question, but I just have a comment. I'll address that. As the saying goes, you build and they'll come. I mean, I think, you know, there has to be some start. When I joined this committee, I think, you know, I was kind of confused. I didn't understand the whole sort of, you know, vision thing. Because again, you know, downtown, I was questioning that, you know, where do we kind of, you know, start, or where do we have the downtown Hicksville? But your vision, whatever you have presented today, that's really, really marvelous. The priorities that you have shown us, I think that's exactly what would be my priorities. You talk about first Parkways West, because again, you're addressing the congestion and all that, Jfk Park, then Broadway, Parkways East, of course, now Highline. It could be the last sort of, you know, piece that ties everything together. But kudos to you, the way, because I'm very clear, you know, after this meeting, I think, you know, where the Hicksville is going to be in 10 years or 15 years, I think that's. And again, your second question, if you were to sort of, you know, select a couple of projects that, you know, shovel ready, and I would say Long Railroad Station entry drive, because congestion is the first, I think, you know, you said we have to deal with. And New Station Plaza, New Bridge Crosswalk. So all these, you know, these 3 or 4 elements, they're not, I think they have 9.9 million or something like that. So that would be my sort of, you know, suggestion to pick up these, because you have to address that part, you know, that the traffic, the railroad, congestion and all that. And of course, you know, then you move in that priority then to that out.
Thank you. John, do you have an idea of how you might want to weight any of these projects?
Yes, absolutely. And kudos to HKS for the tremendous work that you guys have put into it. I have to give it to you, Eric, and Cecil. He's a good salesman. I looked at the Barclays project and I was getting excited, but once I saw what his vision was for JFK Plaza in conjunction with the underline, I see tremendous potential in making the downtown a definition of where it is, because as a Hicksville resident, one of the first questions that you asked is, where do you believe the downtown is? And we had different, opinions. So improving JFK Park, which Cecil correctly stated, it's a park, but it's hard to get to. It's not something that is easily utilized. So by doing the underline with JFK Park, I think has tremendous potential.
I gather by the rules, we could provide support or partial funding for the Nelson Avenue project, the one that you said was $40 million?
It's up to the committee to decide whatever project. All 8 projects, I think, are there. We tried to highlight the 2 that we felt are most shovel-ready, but the committee can consider all 8 projects if they so choose. As well as the other ones that are here, as we went through, I think, A through B. So all the public, the Jfk Park can be considered, as well as all the private. It's up to the committee to choose how much for public and how much for private.
And on A, B, and C, that would have to come 100% from the fund, or that's
no,
shared?
It doesn't have to come 100% from the fund. Right. This could be funded from different buckets of money, whether it's DRI monies, whether it's town monies, whether another source of state funds.
Yes.
I like the idea of creating a downtown and having developers pay into a fund to create the rest of it. But let's start with a nucleus. Let's drop a little atom in the middle and let it spread. That's why I like the Station Plaza, new entry, and probably the Kennedy Park. Start with that and let everyone else contribute that comes in. And get the grants that Dave talked about and get something started, though. Let's get started on it and give the residents something, a downtown they could have and enjoy.
Yeah, I concur also. I think the plaza, the train station area, and JFK Park, I mean, we've been maintaining that thing for a while. It's got a new fountain in there, but if we can expand upon that, create that walkable space, I think that would be a great catalyst. Let everybody know that this destination can actually go to the park, do some stuff, have some events. I think it'll be a fantastic start. And then, like they said, when you start building it, they will come.
Yeah.
I also think the crosswalk improvements and stoplight improvements on Broadway are really important.
Yeah. They will tie in.
I think based on all of that, I would suggest that A, B, and C and the project P, because I think that gives us the biggest bang for the buck for on a tax base.
Yes. I think everybody has expressed concern over those crosswalks. Can it be elevated, or does it work with the design, or, is it practical to have kind of an elevated crosswalk?
The simple answer is no. But to explain it a little bit more in detail, the High Line is the proposition to try to alleviate the conflicts between passenger cars and pedestrians. What we've talked about in the past is that the High Line can be a wonderful experience, but it pretty much is a limited experience. What tends to be better to activate commercial space, as well as to be a community space, is to have multiple points of entry, as well as having the kind of dimension that people can actually occupy. The High Line here more than likely will be relatively narrow, because in part you have to get up to a certain height in order to go over the state highways, and there's a clearance of 15 feet. So that means that you've got a very long thing to traverse in order to get up to that height. And so it starts to ask, what do you connect to as you go up? Do you have spurs that go off? And it just starts to look very expensive. So I think that, as Cecil had mentioned, once we resolve the conditions at grade, which allow for the multiplicity of activities, then you can bring on the special activity of what a High Line might be.
Just one other comment or a question for Dave Ashton. Dave, I think we're asked to identify projects beyond $10 million. Is that right?
Correct.
We have to submit a package of projects that, that's well in excess of $10 million. so we don't have to stop at A, B, and C. That's my point.
In just looking at some of these projects, the ones that would appear to be the ones that we could actually get a shovel in the ground on are ones where the town and some of the state agencies could actually get together and make a deal to get some of these things off the ground and really get things started, like Rose was talking about, and showing Hicksville that we're serious about moving forward with this and bringing this to reality. And I see those in some of the first few on the list over in here. And clearly the concentration or focus has to be down at the train station area on the station entry drive and new station plaza. But as I look at these, I would see that some serious discussions have to happen between the town and the MTA and the state making this thing go. So hopefully the state has a lot of money to offer us in making this become a reality.
Joe lets me know that there is a beautiful connection there.
We're hoping for.
Linda, would you like to make a comment?
There's a phone little boy speaking.
I agree with everyone about the infrastructure being critical first with ABC. I do think paying attention to Nelson Avenue, because that's where you're going to get the mixed use, is really important. So I don't want to lose sight of Nelson Avenue. I love JFK Park being, and I've talked to people that live around here, and they feel the need that needs to be improved. But I think that might be a little further down because you want to get the businesses to come. So, and then the one over here with the investment that everyone's been talking about, 99 Hicksville Station Plaza, to try and jumpstart that station, the mixed use.
I just want to say that when we first started the puzzle, there was really no puzzle there. It was all a bunch of pieces. And what you presented tonight was really, now we have an idea of what downtown Hicksville is going to be. Again, we had different ideas of what was downtown Hicksville. Everybody was thinking Broadway, and it's really not. It's Nelson Avenue. And I agree that congestion is the first thing we have to take a look at, and that 99 Railroad will make it show that we're doing something and to bring other people in.
Thank you.
Speaking of funding, we just sold a piece of property, we're getting $2 million in the C fund, Greg. We could use this for part of downtown, find some space and create.
We'll take it.
Okay. At this point, it's 8:30, and I was going to open up the discussion to the observers, if people at the LPC would care for me to do that. Okay. We only have one mic, so I would ask if people in the audience have a question or comment, if you could come up here so that everybody could hear your question or comment. Do I have any takers? Please, sir. Would you be kind enough just to announce your name and whether you're a Hicksville resident or a business person?
My name is John Budnick. I no longer live in Hicksville anymore, but I used to be the president of the Hicksville Community Council, Hicksville Against Drugs, and Hicksville Kiwanis, and a number of other groups. I'm still interested conceptually in the Hicksville area. Two comments. First of all, I'm not sure, because I just don't know, with reference to what the MTA is going to do with the railroad track area. I hope, but I have no reason to necessarily believe it, that they should be propelled in to a situation where they make from the area of the railroad station west of Newbridge to the area east of 107, that they make a pedestrian pathway along the area where the tracks run. And that they, I can't say be forced, but be encouraged to do so, because I think that having that there will define a lot of the other things that will be necessary and appropriate for the rest of the north and south of that. Second of all, I'm a bit concerned with regard to, once upon a time, there used to be a Nassau County Police booth at the corner of John Street and 106, 107, just south of where Wendy's is now. That's been gone for years. If we're going to make this a draw for this area of Long Island as a transit hub, I think that we need a presence. Maybe it should be the MTA police, I don't know. But that should be considered as one of the aspects to make sure that we have a place that people will feel safe to come to. Speaking as a former assistant district attorney, I've handled over the years, starting in 1974, too many cases of bad things happening at the Hicksville railroad station. Okay? And I was handling sometimes 180 felonies a day. Okay? And I kept seeing things happen at the Hicksville railroad station from 1974 until about 1982, 83 when I left that office. I strongly believe that a hotel somewhere in this vicinity should be definitely on a high priority list. And with regard to the changeover of the Kennedy Park, I think that it has to be engineered so it can become a more usable area where, for example, a town mobile unit can come in there, and during the summer they can have concerts. And that has to be worked in conjunction with the two draws that are already there. There's an old railroad locomotive, and there's also the fountain. And that can be worked into a very attractive backdrop for things like festivals and concerts at that location. Maybe we can ask Billy Joe to come here. Anyhow, thank you. Right, thank you very much for your time and trouble. And there's other things, but I'll send you guys a note. Thank you.
Other comments? Sir, would you like to come up? And Ann, would you like to come up? We'll just start queuing. How about that? Please state your name and what you're
Yes. Yes, my name is Nick Sarandis. I'm a Hicksville resident and president of the Hicksville Garden Civic Association. The one thing that I think everyone should keep in mind, the issue that's come up at our meetings for the past 2 years, and I haven't heard that word mentioned too much, was traffic. As we know, there's a proposal for a new warehouse down on John Street. Today I read in the paper about a proposed bus facility on John Street as well. We have the closing of the Sears property and then the big development that's going to come there at some point in the future, and all the other proposed, the parking garages, the MTA. This brings massive amounts of cars into Hicksville. My residents and my people in the Civic always say, oh, just to get from our area down to the expressway is a 20-minute ride down 107 because of the traffic. So whatever project we consider, and I think most of the project, the increasing of the parks and all of that is very worthwhile and for Hicksville, but there must be a consideration of the traffic. And one thing that we've talked about in the past is when we build the new parking garages, whether they be the MTA parking garages or parking garages in connection with the Sears project, we have all those commercial lots within Hicksville. And I think that
there's got to be some effort to try to control that issue, because more cars in Hicksville, no matter how good you make the roads and how good you make the walkability and whatever you want, you bring all these traffic in here, you're just going to have people coming in and going out because they don't want to be involved with taking 20 minutes, half hour to get out of Hicksville just to get to another community. So just take that in mind. We're at Civic are willing to listen to all your proposals, because we think the development of Hicksville is very worthwhile, and I thank you for your time.
Hi, please state your name and if you're a Hicksville resident.
My name is Eileen Supran. I am actually a Plainview resident, but I'm always interested in seeing how areas are going to be developed and beautified. So I came to the last meeting where you did the Bucks, and I came to this meeting just to see where it's developed. One of my biggest concerns that I don't quite think was addressed is the parking situation at the train station. I am not a commuter. This has nothing to do with what I personally want, but I was wondering, did you look into the amount of daily commuters there are from Hicksville, and then how many parking spots there are in Hicksville? Was that part of it? Okay. I called the town the other day, and I think there are, I don't remember the exact number, they said in the low 3,000 number for town parking that you have to get the $10 sticker for, and 500 pay spots. That's that triangle where they charge you, I think, $10 a day. So let's say, 3,200, 3,300, something like that. There are 5,700 Hicksville monthly tickets sold every single month. Called the MTA the other day. That's what they said for the past, several months. It's 5,700. An additional, about 100 people buy a daily ticket every single day, so it's 5,800. Now, I live in Plainview. Right now, there is an 800 home development being built now. There are also other developments that are being built that will frequent this train station. And I think that without adding parking, now nobody likes what parking looks like, but I have to go into the city next Friday. I am stressing out. I don't know if I'm going to bring my car. I don't know if I'm going to go to the pay lot. I don't know if I'm going to call an Uber. And that's one day that I'm going in. It's a big stress factor for people. Every time you want young people to stay here, they have to commute to the city. A lot of them are going to commute to the city so they can make enough money to sustain a life here. And the Long Island Railroad parking situation is not getting any better. In fact, it's going to get worse over the next year and a half. And it's hard to know from this plan exactly how many spots are being removed. I know the MTA is adding several hundred, but right now we have a shortage of 2,500 spots for daily commuters every single day of the week, and I just would like to see that addressed or something changed so we don't have that bigger problem. We're adding, I know there's adding residential there. Every person who lives in an apartment is going to have a car. Their spouse or their significant other, their roommate is going to have a car. So you're also adding more people who will have cars to this area and have to put their car somewhere. So I just don't see the parking situation. I know there are many things that everybody's concerned with. I just wanted to address one, and that is my concern. So do you have a number for the amount of commuter spots? I'm just asking.
Oh, yeah, I'll answer.
Oh,
The proposed parking garage is for 1,100 spots, but it would be built on 200 spots that are existing, so there'll be a net gain of 900 spots proposed. And if we end up going with the design these guys have, these will be the most beautiful parking garages you've ever seen, because they will be wrapped with buildings. And in response to some of the question, I believe, on the retail units, especially on the 99 Station Plaza, the one on Nelson Avenue, it's containing the parking on site, and its proposal on the drawings, like I said, nothing on site plan, will have parking on site with 2 levels of underground parking to maintain the parking for their residences.
Are there other people who would like to make comments? If not, then I will start to draw this to a close. Yes, sir?
Hi, my name is Kevin McKenna. I'm from Syosset. Been following this very, very closely. I have to commend you, Eric, for the presentation and a big picture outlook. It looks great, but just to follow up on the traffic, I just heard Jim McCaffrey talk about the addition of 900 spaces, so on and so forth. But in light of the overall picture, with the third rail, with the additional traffic that's going to come to Hicksville with the third rail, in light of, I'm not going to go into other areas, but other developments that are going to come in this area, what analysis has been done? Have numbers been put together to determine what type of parking you actually need for the projected growth with all these other scenarios coming? I just get the feeling, and maybe I'm wrong, but I just get the feeling that, and you have to start the way you started. But I don't feel, I've heard talk in the past about how have we not done any type of, I hate the word traffic study because we know there's traffic, but where's the engineering support on this committee? Not on the committee, but where's the engineer that is looking at the big picture, the master plan, to determine what type of traffic, whether that route is going to be able to handle. It looks great, but where's the analysis? Where's the data? That would be nice to be able to see.
Previous speaker, who died and left Hicksville, the only station on the Long Island Railroad that could support this kind of traffic. There are other stations on Long Island here. It doesn't have to be Hicksville. You're dealing with a problem that can be solved if you just open your mind to a little win-win. The last time they built this disastrous parking lot over here, I said the same thing. Why do we have to keep doing, why is Hicksville support for all of Long Island practically for parking into Manhattan? It can be changed. So all we have to do is look at a couple stations up the line, and in fact, there's one very close in Syosset that has a parking space that could be utilized. And I just would like to have that as part of the solution here. Thank you.
Hello, please state your name and whether you're a Hicksville resident.
Hicksville resident. My name is Andrea Smith. I have a man before me kind of stole my thunder. Yes. I have a question. The Nelson Avenue project, is that going to alleviate some of those private parking lots that are there? Yes. Okay. Well, that's good because Hicksville has become a giant eyesore. The other things that have the pictures you put up, a lot of the buildings have parking lots underneath them with apartments over them. Is that true? Okay. I don't know who would want to live over a parking lot. I'm really not sure if that's going to fly. Has that been done before? It has. I mean, it's worked. Okay, and also what I wanted to say was, Syosset, that page, there used to be a station on Robbins Lane in Syosset where people would drop off and let off and got on. Why can't there be parking garages there? Zero Wire is a perfect place for a parking.
No more there. I think she meant the last one. Yeah.
The white building in the middle. That's the Fedex Building, right? So I had to go there today. I had to wait 15 minutes for a spot. They have 5 spots at 25 New Bridge Road. They have 5 spots for FedEx people. There's no parking in that block, that whole block. You can't park. Why? That building's huge. It has no parking spaces. How come? That's number one. So you're gonna put a park there, and you're gonna take, that building has no parking. Where are the people gonna park when you have the park there?
It's a migration that will be parking around. The area here that's all as the property owners in and around Barclay choose to do a different land use than what's current, the parking will get organized and shifted around to provide the right level of parking for that people.
Okay, across sideways is pink buildings. That's new construction. Right now, that's a parking lot. That's a private parking lot that you need a sticker for right now. So when you add those buildings, then where are those people gonna park? Within the building, underground, on the main level, and this stuff is gonna be on top. That's gonna be a parking lot too, where the pink building is? That's gonna be a parking structure with stores. That 25 New Bridge Road is terrible. So don't go there for FedEx, you should keep it.
Online. Pickup, don't they, in your house? It's closing at 9 o'clock, so we will have about 2 more comments. Okay.
My name is Lisa Reinhardt. I'm a resident and a commuter. I just have a bunch of concerns here. One is still the distribution. I know you guys said you have a lot of outreach and you've been doing Facebook and stuff. I'm still seeing it secondhand a lot of times. I know a lot of people still aren't getting the messages when these meetings are taking place. For the amount of expansion and development we're talking about, we should be using a high school auditorium and having it packed and extra. People are not getting the message about when these meetings are taking place. So that's huge. Number 2, speaking as a resident, as a commuter, I'm also concerned about traffic studies. I also hate to use the phrase traffic study. The congestion does need to be de-escalated, but nobody's mentioned at this meeting or the last meeting about any traffic study that's, I mean, you're saying put the parking under and build above, but when you're talking on 107, when I was looking at that picture of the corridor, it's saying bring the west side forward, again, instead of having parking lots fronting 107, bring the buildings forward, put the parking in the back, I guess, or in the middle. But you're saying residential on almost every one of those buildings, it looked like. That also has to be factored in. I also know that in Plainview, I know a guy who comes to Hicksville, lives in Plainview, him and his wife both have stickers for parking on their car. So if they both decide to go in, that's 2 people from Plainview, and again, I know people have already said that, but that can't be stressed enough, that it looks like there's not gonna be enough room, and the railway expansion is gonna take more spots, and the Dwyer parking lot, it looks like you're trying to get rid of that. I mean, it looks like there's gonna be a lot of problems with the commuting, and as a resident, the corridor on 107 and around there is so congested that it really has to be a priority, and it has to be discussed in these meetings so us residents can hear what the planning for that is. because saying you're going to do more parking structures is great, but the 6-year-old one that I park in every day, people are always saying, don't park in that, it's not safe. They've had lolly columns up for months. There's been no comment from anybody on what the process to fix that is. And now you're talking about building a whole bunch more. I understand it's a different administration, and they're going to go about it more transparently, we hope, and use the money for better uses, we hope. But I haven't heard that addressed at all. And that's one of the main things you're talking about is a train plaza. We have to discuss the parking. And if you're going to be taking away spots for the plaza, it just doesn't seem to kind of match up to me. Yeah. Thank you. The presentation was very pretty.
My name's Rich Pfeiffer. I've been a resident since '53. My concern is your parking. You say that it's going to be increased. I can understand that, but I don't think it should be increased to too much more than what it is right now. I know people from other towns want to come in, they want to commute to the city. Being a resident of Hicksville since '53, I'm tired of other people dumping on Hicksville. Everybody wants to come in here, say they need more parking. We might as well just close Hicksville down and make a parking lot. I mean, you know, it's coming to that. So if anything, we need what you have now, no more. I understand the gentleman lady complained, everybody wants to come in here and I can't get to the city. I mean, come on, this is our home. They're coming into our home, want to travel out of our area. I might as well open up my garage and have somebody park in there.
That's what I'm thinking also. That's my driveway.
And as far as the traffic, they talked about it, of course, it's been blowing up a study since I'm living right close to the area. There has to be a study done because it's going to be ridiculous. I mean, and now you're going to have people, like you say, making nice crosswalks across. That's going to hold traffic up. It'll be backed up to Northern State. It's almost that way now. All we put in was an after bazaar, and now it's back up to my house, almost to the train station. Something's got to be done about that. And the other thing is, when this construction starts, where is all this equipment going to go?
Amen.
Where are they going to start? I mean, they're going to start construction. I mean, they're going to put all these digging equipment in Sears parking lot or Home Depot. Where is all that going to be handled? You got a lot of construction going on you're talking about. Where's all this equipment going to go? Broadway? I don't know. You got it?
We don't have answers about those specific things. This is a particular program. Yeah, exactly, because this is a vision for what downtown could be. The whole description of the program is the Downtown Revitalization Initiative. So the program here that's being funded by New York State is focused on what interventions could take place in the near term that would enable Hicksville to reach towards its vision for what it could be in the future. So none of the things that we have shown today have gone down to that level of detail to resolve the issues that some of the people have just now mentioned. What we've been able to do is think through a series of steps where we believe that as private sector development comes forward on the properties that they own, that the parking would work in tandem with that development. The lots that the town owns currently that provide surface lot parking, we believe can be increased in the amount of parking with these parking structures. And with a shared parking strategy, meaning between commuters, retail, and residential uses, that there will be ample parking supply. Not trying to, traffic is the other issue, and I understand that the town has been undertaking a traffic study that will be completed in the next couple of months. Is that correct? So. So it is 9 o'clock, and one of the things that I've been encouraged to do is to keep these meetings on schedule. And so what I'd like people to remember is that we're going to have the next local planning committee meeting right here on February 15th. So I would encourage all who are interested to come and observe then. We are scheduling our third public workshop for February 26th, which is Monday evening, and I encourage everybody to come then. So thank you again for coming.